What would change if from the moment we open our eyes, we ask ourselves where we are heading and what is guiding us? That question seems simple, yet it brings us back to an awareness of ourselves. A small reminder in the morning can keep us from the invisible distractions where old habits easily take over. When we actively set the intention to live for the new day, a silent boundary is drawn. The part we control and the part we let drift by inertia. Intention is not a grand promise. It is merely a nod to ourselves that we will not let the entire day be swept away meaninglessly. It is undeniable that our words become the echoes that linger longest in our minds. Words may seem light, but they possess a strong pull, sometimes even stronger than actions. The tone in which we narrate our lives also sets the context for how we live. A complaint sows further discouragement, while a self-reminder adds stability. When we understand the weight of each word spoken, we no longer easily let slip phrases that weigh us down, nor do we chase after unrealistic embellishments. We strive to keep our words aligned with the direction we want to take, just enough to not weaken our spirit, and just enough to not deceive ourselves. In the silence between two thoughts, the possibility of self-improvement is always open. This does not come from enthusiastic slogans, but from the habit of looking directly at our reactions. When we choose to see each encounter as an opportunity to test our resilience, our mindset shifts. Discomfort is no longer an enemy, but a mirror reflecting our loose points. Gradually, we learn to give our emotions a moderate place, neither letting them lead the way, nor denying their existence. This is a quiet yet enduring journey of improvement, as it stems from the attitude we adopt each time we face reality. In fact, the world does not necessarily dictate us. Rather, it is our interpretation that shapes most of our experiences. An event is just an event, while the rest comes from our reactions to it. When we become aware of this, we no longer rush to judge everything in familiar ways. We allow a breath to interject between the event and our response, just enough to retain control. This calmness is not avoidance, but a deliberate choice, not to let ourselves be pulled away by things beyond our control. Autonomy returns when we accept responsibility for how we perceive life. Mornings become important because they are the only time of day when our minds have not yet been pulled toward familiar noise. If we know how to take advantage of it, we can reclaim that time to reset the course for the entire day. A few minutes of silence are enough to remind ourselves to live purposefully, not to let the day drift in a state of continuous reaction. When the morning belongs to us, we naturally maintain our proactivity longer throughout the rest of the day. The pace of life may still be busy, but it is no longer chaotic. Each action holds more meaning when it arises from a clear intention, not from the pull of circumstances. And then, when we look back, we realize that change does not lie in grand moments. But in the mornings we do not neglect ourselves. Everything begins with reiterating what is important, choosing the right words, maintaining a mindset of improvement, controlling our reactions, and reclaiming the sovereignty of each day. It is not an easy path, but it is a path real enough for us to know where we are heading. Pressing the follow button is like a small but intentional step in the journey of cultivating the mind. It is not a loud promise. It is merely a quiet gesture to remind oneself that mental strength does not arise spontaneously. By choosing to stay connected to a source that nurtures awareness, we accept the challenge of looking inward, recognizing where we are still easily swayed and where we need further nurturing. Self-awareness does not come from fleeting inspiration, but from the small choices we repeat every day. When we create additional space for growth, meaning, and understanding, we are establishing a new environment for ourselves. This space is not noisy, does not demand display, but is simply wide enough for the mind to pause and observe. In that space, growth occurs quietly. Hasty reactions are replaced by consideration, extreme emotions are tempered by awareness, and new layers of understanding are formed, not to escape life, but to enter it with greater stability. Following a source that nurtures the spirit can also support the way we perceive the world. Each encounter with new insights is an opportunity to adjust our thinking, to shed habits that weigh down the mind, and to retain what helps us stand firm. An elevated mind is not a whimsical mind, but one that knows how to stand tall amidst turmoil, choosing responses rather than being swept away. Following a suitable channel is just the first step, but it marks an important decision. To consciously choose a path that is persistent and calm enough for the soul to no longer drift along trivial matters. There exists a silent weight that follows each person. Old memories that have been held onto for so long that they become an uninvited part of the present. When past experiences are viewed as evidence that binds oneself to old limits, they quietly pull back every step forward. This burden does not lie in whether the past was dark or bright, but in the fact that it is held as an immutable declaration about the person today. Whenever we let memory lead, instead of making active choices, our inner strength is eroded without us realizing it. The mistakes of the past also have a way of stifling potential. When an unwise action is labeled as an inherent flaw, the path to development suddenly narrows, not because the error is too great, but because the belief in the ability to change is worn down. If we continue to view ourselves through the lens of old mistakes, inner freedom is hard to blossom. What is necessary is not to deny what has happened, but to stop seeing them as a life sentence. There is still a door that opens when we realize that the past no longer has absolute control. Letting go is not about erasing memories, but about returning them to their rightful place, behind us, not in front of us. There is no reason to grant past moments the power to dictate the direction. Relief only appears when we dare to drop each old story from our shoulders, allowing our feet to move forward without being burdened. When we accept ourselves as a being in transformation, the journey of life opens up a new rhythm. Evolution does not occur noisily, but quietly in each small choice. The essence is to recognize that personality, habits, or reactions can be reshaped every day. Each shift, no matter how small, is still an affirmation that we are not stuck in the old version. The self is being recreated with determination rather than waiting for a miracle. The present always grants a special power to those who know when to pause. Right in this moment, we can set down the useless and hold on to what is necessary. The ability to control the present moment is stronger than any fear or regret that lies in memory. Just a moment of silence, and proactivity returns. And from that point, each action is born from awareness rather than reacting out of habit. Each morning brings an opportunity to rewrite one's own story. Not in the sense of starting over, but in adjusting the perspective. Turning today into proof that we still have choices. A new page does not need to be dramatic. Sometimes it just takes a small determination to change how we face the world. When the story is rewritten with autonomy, the rhythm of life becomes more sustainable, clearer, and less swayed by old echoes. Freedom does not lie in forgetting everything that has happened, but in knowing how to choose what is allowed to affect us. Each choice, no matter how simple, opens up a new range for the path ahead. When the power of decision returns to our hands, tranquility appears as a natural result. This freedom is not loud. It quietly supports each step, reminding us that our inner life can always be reshaped by what we choose in this moment. The dim light of the early morning sometimes casts a gentle hue over everything, making us feel as if all old stories are fading away, leaving a wide enough space for a new line of text. In that moment, the power to reshape our own narrative becomes clearer. It is not a kind of optimistic dreaming, but a sober awareness that life always lies in the hands of those brave enough to hold the pen. Even if we have told lies, made mistakes, or lingered too long in a dark chapter, we can still adjust the rhythm, modify the tone, and create a different direction for the journey ahead. Self-control begins at this point, understanding that the power of creation does not abandon us. It merely waits for us to call it back. When reflecting on past mistakes, it is easy to feel as if they have permanently stamped our fate. But in reality, they are merely temporary ink stains on the rough paper of experience. They sting sharply, sometimes making us fear repetition. But upon closer observation, they contain more guidance than condemnation. Mistakes are not shackles. They are signs indicating where reinforcement is needed, where change is necessary. The important thing is not to let them become the main story, but to view them as footnotes that help us write more coherently in the following chapters. Epictetus's reminder about how to respond to events often resonates like a necessary pause amidst the turmoil. Not everything that happens is under our control, but our feelings, interpretations, and choices of attitude are entirely ours. When we maintain that anchor, we are no longer pulled away by fluctuations. We do not have to avoid or deny reality. We simply refuse to relinquish the power to decide our mindset to circumstances. This calmness is not coldness, but wisdom that allows us to see our path clearly, even when the sky is heavy with clouds. In every situation, even those we once considered failures, there is always an opportunity to rise. It does not appear brightly or easily. Often, it is hidden in the most uncomfortable things, in unsuccessful dialogues, in disrupted plans. But once we accept to pause and observe, we will realize that this opportunity is the necessary space for our growth. No one gives it, and no one takes it away. It emerges when we are patient enough to understand what is truly happening within ourselves. And then, as these pieces quietly stack upon one another, self-determination becomes a more natural state. Not loud, not ostentatious. Just a stability that comes from knowing we can rewrite the story. Learn from past mistakes. Keep our reactions from being controlled by external factors, and find opportunities to grow even in seemingly insurmountable cracks. This is not an easy path, but it is the path that leads us back to ourselves. Innovation begins with a decisive look at the present, not with colorful promises, but with a breath slow enough to recognize what we carry that no longer serves the path ahead. When we pause and let go of the past, there is no ritual to perform, only honesty with ourselves. There are memories that have eroded trust, choices that were once right, but now only add pressure. Letting them go is not denial, but allowing ourselves to walk lighter, with the necessary clarity to retain what is valuable and move away from what has completed its role. As the old burdens settle, a void appears. This void is not as frightening as it seems. It is where new opportunities quietly emerge. Opportunities are not always loud or brilliant. Often, it is just a small shift in thinking, a different perspective on responsibility, or a seemingly ordinary step that opens up a longer path. Growth does not need to be rushed. It requires steadfastness in looking at what can be improved, no matter how small, and being ready to lay the foundation from the simplest things. When no longer held back by what is past, maturity begins to have space to expand. Among the choices ahead, starting anew demands the most personal courage. No one can guarantee that a new beginning will be smooth, but the proactive choice to start is already a foothold. Choosing to renew oneself is not to deny the deviations that have occurred, but to not let them continue to shape us. Each choice, no matter how small, carries its own weight. The seriousness in each step helps us maintain a steady rhythm, avoiding being swept up in the impatience to achieve immediate results. Starting again is not a journey back to square one, but a continuation forward, with a brighter spirit and clearer responsibility for the direction we choose. And as the new path begins to take shape, a familiar yet strange feeling gradually emerges. The feeling of getting closer to the true self within. It is not a perfect version, but one no longer influenced by unnecessary layers of concealment. Stepping into the essence of oneself is the step of accepting both strengths and unfinished parts, without embellishment or minimization. This honesty brings peace, as it allows us to live more clearly with our goals, attitudes, and personal pace. When we no longer have to play a role, we gain enough autonomy to continue moving forward without being disturbed by unreasonable expectations from the outside. Thus, renewal is not a dramatic transformation, but a quiet, steady process that begins with stopping, letting go, looking for opportunities, choosing to renew, and living true to our core. In that simplicity, a new life quietly unfolds. There are familiar patterns that seem safe, but actually keep people trapped in a tiring loop. Recognizing them is not about rebelling, but about facing how unconscious habits erode inner vitality. When a rhythm repeats for too long, the mind becomes narrow, and choices that seem obvious are actually just surrendering to inertia. Awareness begins the moment we dare to stand still, observing our lives as if looking at a room that has been closed for too long, then cracking open the door to let light in. Freedom often arises from a very small step, refusing to continue with things that no longer fit, even if they were once a familiar support. The ability to change lies in how one treats each day. No one can uproot themselves from the past in a single breath, but one can start to redirect their path through specific, calm, and persistent actions. Transformation is not a miracle, but a continuous effort to become clearer in thought and wiser in choice. Each time we eliminate a useless habit from our lives, our inner strength seems to be partially restored. As that strength accumulates, a new version of oneself gradually takes shape, quietly maturing in its natural rhythm without noise or drama. The future does not arrive unexpectedly. It grows from small decisions made in the present. Every choice silently shapes the form of tomorrow, and even hesitation is a form of choice. When we take on that responsibility, the mind becomes quieter, less reliant on chance, and more focused on what is within reach. An action taken right now, no matter how humble, can still shift an entire trajectory. Thus, the future is not something to predict, but something to create bit by bit, with awareness and steadfastness towards what one believes is right. And throughout this entire journey, allowing oneself to live true to their nature is the key to preventing everything from becoming an escape. This allowance is not a form of self-indulgence, but an acknowledgement of what truly fits, discarding unnecessary roles. When we stop trying to be a copy of someone else, we expend less energy on interpreting emotions and begin to direct our energy towards what is meaningful. Inner freedom starts from the right to be oneself, and when that right is firmly held, other choices also become more serene. Contrary to the feeling of having to chase after the gaze of others, true self-control is only formed when the heart is calm enough not to cling to praise or attention. This contrast shows that the weight of external factors is only strong when we allow them to determine our self-worth. When the gap between what we want and what others expect narrows, dependence tightens. Only when we dare to stand alone does the mind have enough space to operate according to its own principles. From this, the most important affirmation does not come from anyone outside. It comes from the feeling that we have acted rightly, been honest with our choices, and maintained our spiritual backbone even amidst the noise around us. That measure does not create noise or showiness. It is as simple as a deep breath, where we realize that what drives us is not admiration, but the need to live in accordance with what we believe is right. This type of affirmation is silent, yet it is what helps us stand firm in the face of turmoil. In moments of silence, one can clearly see what an ancient emperor once mentioned. The quality of thought shapes the quality of life. There is no need for quotes. Just observing long enough reveals that truth. When the mind is filled with fragments of worry, competition, or judgment, actions are hard to be clear. Conversely, when thoughts are trained to be simple, orderly, and purposeful, every choice becomes more streamlined. We are no longer swept away by fleeting emotions, but know how to direct our thoughts toward what we can control. Maintaining sovereignty over each thought and action is the first step to reshaping oneself. This responsibility cannot be replaced by anyone. Each reaction to an unpleasant remark, each decision at a crossroads, each moment of wanting to give up or wanting to take another step, is an opportunity to show whether we are leading or being led. When we actively observe our minds, we realize many unnecessary movements, repetitive thoughts, unreasonable expectations, unnecessary calculations. By eliminating those things, the heart becomes lighter and the path ahead clearer. Then comes a moment when we understand that fate is not a sudden gust of wind, but the result of how we think and act each day. Determination does not come from chance, but from the ability to self-correct, to rectify mistakes, and to rise again after falling. When the spirit is trained to be proactive and steadfast, we no longer wait for life to change direction. We become the ones shaping it, step by step, with clear choices and an inner self that is not easily shaken. Self-reliance, therefore, is not stubbornness, nor is it a denial of help. It is a commitment that every change in our lives must first originate from within. And when we stand in that position, all external factors become mere materials. The direction still lies in our own hands. The morning light stretches across the damp ground, revealing the tiny veins of leaves still glistening with dew. That tranquil scene resembles a door opening to a new space, where one can step in unbound by old traces. In that moment, the thought of becoming the best version of oneself emerges not as a grand slogan, but as a quiet feeling when taking a deep breath and realizing one can start anew at any time. That opportunity does not come from luck, but from the choices made with each step, each thing held on to, and each thing let go. The future, though unpredictable, resembles an open page where the story of growth is quietly being written. Each phase of life does not need to be perfect, just real. Strength does not appear in loud moments, but in the times one stands up when no one is watching. Perseverance is not about exhausting effort, but about maintaining direction even when faith begins to wane. Looking back, the connections between the paths form a story that is not glamorous, but substantial enough to remind one that they have gone through more than they realize. That story is always shaped by the small choices made each day. A seemingly insignificant decision can sometimes become a pivotal turning point. Not every choice is right, but each choice leaves a mark, helping one understand themselves better, become more resilient, and be more realistic. The important thing is to keep the mind clear enough to recognize what one is continuing to write, and to have the courage to adjust direction when realizing they have strayed. The future is not predetermined. It stretches according to the quality of each choice, each habit, each step taken. And to calmly step into those choices, sometimes it only takes starting with a few simple affirmations. Not embellished statements, but brief reminders that help the mind stand tall amidst daily distractions. That one has the right to start over, That one has the ability to face the challenges ahead. That every step, no matter how small, holds value. Such affirmations serve as a support to keep the will from being swept away, reminding the mind that every change begins with internal initiative, not from circumstances. From the serene atmosphere of the morning to the quiet choices shaping the future, everything evokes a familiar yet never old truth. People can always continue to write the best parts of their life story, as long as they maintain awareness in each step and kindness towards themselves in every small beginning. Have you ever wondered why a person continues to reach for praise, higher positions, or a wider circle of relationships, even when they feel so exhausted inside that they no longer want to move forward? This question often arises during rare moments of silence, when no noise is loud enough to drown out the sense of emptiness flowing beneath all efforts. It forces us to look directly at the true motives behind the hurried steps. In the relentless pursuit of acceptance, success, or a place to belong, we think we are moving forward. But in reality, we are pushing ourselves into a competition where the destination always recedes. Each time we achieve a small success, the joy lasts only a breath before fading away. What remains is the same emptiness, repeating itself over and over. This pursuit is not wrong, but when it becomes a condition for validating our self-worth, we have relinquished the power to define our lives to things that will never stand still. The harder we try to move quickly, the more it feels like we are stuck in an endlessly spinning wheel. From the outside, everything may appear to be progress. More tasks, more goals, more plans. But inside, the movement resembles someone running in place. The fatigue does not come from speed, but from the inability to reach the place we thought would bring us peace. Once accustomed to this cycle, we easily forget that we can step off at any time. What is more concerning is that much of this pursuit stems from a sense of lack. Not a lack of material things, but a lack of belief in ourselves. When we believe we are missing something to be good enough, worthy enough, we will continuously seek it externally. Each goal becomes a temporary patch. Each achievement becomes a short-term painkiller. And just as the effect fades, the anxiety returns intact, as if it had never been touched. In that state, we unconsciously reinforce the belief that what we need lies outside of us. The more we receive, the stronger the feeling of dependence becomes. Gradually, we lose the ability to stand firm on our own. A compliment can lift us up, but it can also make us tremble when it is absent. A moment of recognition can provide motivation, but it can also turn into a tether that forces us to maintain an image that aligns with others' expectations. When we give too much power to the outside world, our autonomy erodes little by little. Deep beneath those layers of behavior lies the shadow of fear and scarcity. Fear of not being good enough. Fear of being left behind. Fear of having no place if we do not stand on a specific achievement. These fears are not loud, but they are persistent and enduring. They make each step carry a tone of defensiveness rather than an active choice. When the mind is driven by scarcity, every movement becomes a reaction. And when actions are merely reactions, we no longer truly live according to our own will. Looking back at this entire whirlwind, the initial question becomes clearer. Is the pursuit leading us to freedom, or is it pulling us away from the freedom that lies within? The answer does not need to be rushed. It only requires enough honesty to look straight ahead, and enough patience to realize that changing our perspective is sometimes more important than any new goal. The internal state becomes clearer when we realize that we always have the power to adjust our reactions and perspectives on everything. Emotional waves may arise unexpectedly, but their direction lies within our control. Each time we suppress an impulse, each time we maintain our composure amidst silent clashes, We see our inner structure being rearranged, not to become cold, but to avoid being swept away by fleeting things. This proactivity creates a solid foundation, helping us stand firm even as our surroundings change in unpredictable rhythms, when the feeling of peace no longer depends on external looks or compliments. We begin to breathe more easily. This stillness does not come from separating ourselves from the world, but from not entrusting our emotional fate to others. Approval can turn a bright day into a gloomy one simply because someone is silent or erratic. Once we no longer trade our inner selves for recognition, we gradually step out of the cycle of expectation and disappointment. From there, our inner strength operates at a more serene pace, no longer jolted by external fluctuations. All desires become clearer when we focus on becoming a person with a natural attraction to what we pursue. Effort no longer manifests as chasing, but as building from the ground up. An upright character, a persistent habit, a self-sufficient lifestyle creates a silent, yet powerful allure. When the inner self is refined, what we seek often moves toward us, not because of luck, but due to the compatibility that is formed beforehand. This makes the journey less stressful, as we are no longer running, but growing to become suitable. The concept that Carl Jung describes about resistance sheds light on an interesting aspect of the inner development process. Resistance is not a destroyer, but a signal that something stands between us and a brighter version of ourselves. Whenever the mind resists a seemingly small change, it is often the point of contact with old limits. Instead of stubbornly pushing through or turning away, looking directly at that contraction helps us understand the cause. From understanding, we gradually untangle, so that effort does not turn into a simmering battle with ourselves. When chasing something excessively, that resistance often transforms into a pursuit behavior. The harder we try to grasp, the more we feel the distance between desire and current ability. Chasing becomes a form of subtle resistance to the truth that we are not yet calm enough to attract that thing. The pursuit disrupts the natural rhythm, causing us to tense up and easily stray from our true nature. Only when we stop do we realize we are fighting against feelings of lack rather than against the goal. From there, we move more slowly but surely, no longer based on impatience. When everything is driven by continuous effort without the necessary relaxation, a tiring loop appears. No matter how much we strive, the results still do not bring a sense of lightness. Each step forward becomes heavy, as if a layer of fog clings to every movement. This feeling does not stem from an overly large goal, but from an inner self lacking breathing space. When effort separates from natural feeling, we operate like a machine with screws tightened too much. Only by restoring balance between action and stillness can that loop gradually loosen, allowing the journey to return to its proper rhythm. Each layer of awareness is peeled away in this way, helping the inner maturation process unfold quietly, yet steadily. Each step becomes more streamlined, each choice less hurried. And in that calmness, we realize that inner strength does not come from running fast, but from the ability to keep pace with our true nature. Where does true attraction really begin? And why does the atmosphere change when someone enters a room, even if they don't try to show off anything? Attraction is often attributed to appearance or talent, but its roots lie in the quiet confidence from within. When a person is secure enough not to seek approval, every movement they make becomes light yet decisive. This confidence is not loud, does not need to be affirmed by words, but is simply a state of being that causes others to automatically adjust their attitudes when standing nearby. It comes from knowing what one is doing, knowing one can take responsibility for their own life, and knowing that there is no need to borrow light from anyone else. From that foundation, attraction increases when individuals choose to live true to the best version of themselves. Harmony with one's highest self is not something grand or mysterious. It is simply about maintaining choices consistent with the values one believes to be right. When living true to that, the voice becomes less hurried, the gaze less bewildered, and spontaneous reactions gradually fade away. A person moving toward their best self does not need to assert themselves. Consistency speaks for everything. However, achieving that harmony requires a journey inward, not to overanalyze, but to identify what pulls us down and what lifts us up. When attention is directed toward the process of becoming, rather than comparison, the mind becomes less distracted by external things. The pressure to prove something gradually dissipates, making way for an attitude of mastering each small step. Looking inward is not about escaping the world, but about stepping out with a stronger spirit, unshaken by fleeting praise or criticism. As inner strength is built, opportunities and the right people begin to move toward us as if drawn by an invisible force, not because the universe favors us, but because stability allows us to recognize what is suitable more easily, to dare to embrace it, and also to let go of what is no longer necessary. Others sense that clarity. They feel more at ease around someone who knows where they are going and is not swayed by trivial matters. Opportunities thus find it easier to come as they are attracted to places of order and discipline. All of this is only complete when energy and presence are nurtured every day. Not the explosive kind of energy, but a steady flow without erratic ups and downs. A person who is fully present in the moment, not letting their mind wander, always creates a sense of reliability. This presence makes words carry more weight and actions resonate more widely. It does not force anyone to pay attention, but makes others want to listen. It does not need to provoke, but makes others want to come closer. Personal attraction is never an innate gift. It is the result of cultivating quiet confidence, living true to one's highest self, focusing on self-improvement, opening the door to suitable opportunities, and maintaining a stable source of energy. When these elements converge, attraction is no longer something to be sought after. It appears naturally, like breath, like footsteps, like the rhythm of life that we choose to preserve each day. A life guided by openness and self-compassion always requires mindfulness. Openness is not a call to live lightly, but rather the courage to reflect on oneself whenever the mind wants to close off. Self-compassion is not self-indulgence, but the honest acknowledgement of what one needs to remain steadfast. When these two elements blend together, inner strength becomes more stable and reactions to all fluctuations become less extreme. A person who is sufficiently open is not swayed by transient judgments. Someone who knows self-compassion does not turn themselves into a victim of any circumstance. As the habits, mindsets, and attitudes of success gradually manifest in small actions, change becomes clearer than any stated goal. There is no sudden transformation, only a series of repeated choices long enough to establish a routine. Stable habits create durability. Mindful thinking fosters clarity, and a restrained attitude creates space for timely action. Success is not a destination, but the trace of days when one takes responsibility for each step taken. When we orient ourselves towards a version capable of attracting success, we learn not to chase results. Attraction does not lie in appearance, but in the solidity emanating from someone who knows exactly what they are nurturing. This version does not require proof, only consistency. And whenever faced with a choice, the most important question becomes, which action brings me closer to the person I want to become? The answer is always simple, yet never easy. When virtue operates as a quiet magnet, everything that aligns naturally comes forth. Virtue does not mean boasting or polishing oneself. It simply means living true to the standards one commits to when no one is watching. A person who maintains their inner boundaries naturally creates a sense of safety and trust. This magnetism is not loud, but persistent. It retains what is valuable and lets go of what does not belong. When each step harmonizes with the natural order, the tension within eases. Things have their own laws. Life has its own pace. The more one tries to force everything to happen according to their own will, the more fatigued the mind becomes. But when one acts rightly in their part and is patient with the rhythm of the world, the entanglement gradually dissolves. Not because everything goes smoothly, but because one no longer resists the inherent flow. A person who understands this no longer seeks ease. They seek to be steady enough to navigate all changes. All of the above is not a goal for a day or a phase. They are simply a stable, slow way of living, yet powerful enough to bring about lasting transformation. When the mind is open, self-compassion is practiced correctly, discipline is clear, virtue is steadfast, and the rhythm of life aligns with a greater order. The path of self-improvement becomes less noisy, but much deeper. And there, every step forward carries meaning, no matter how small. Addressing misconceptions often begins by confronting the distortions that obscure the essence of a principle. When discussing the law of attraction, many attribute to it an illusory quality, as if simply thinking hard enough will cause life to bend to one's desires. This understanding undermines one's capacity for personal responsibility. No ideology can replace a proactive attitude, and no desire can create results if one is not ready to take action. The core point always lies in daily behavior. Every choice, every reaction, every way we face a situation creates a direction for ourselves. People often speak of energy as an abstract concept, but in reality, it is merely the sum of habits, speech, consistency, and attitude toward life. When these elements lack order, we easily lose the power to shape our own path. When they become clear and intentional, life responds with corresponding results. Focusing on what can be controlled is the most stable foundation. The moods of others, external fluctuations, or unexpected developments are not within our control. The only thing that belongs to us is how we use our time, the level of awareness in each decision, and the discipline to avoid being swayed by fleeting emotions. When we maintain that order, external disturbances no longer have the power to redirect our inner selves. And then, it is this stability that attracts compatible things. The right people come because they sense the consistency. Opportunities arise when our actions clearly reflect where we are headed. Valuable experiences come when our life energy is not scattered on things beyond our control. There is nothing mystical in this process. It is simply a natural law between how we operate and what life responds with. When we understand these simple principles, attraction is no longer a vague expectation. It becomes the inevitable result of a life arranged with awareness, discipline, and proactivity in every step taken. There are moments that make us wonder how far we can truly go. And the answer often comes in the form of a simple concept: the journey to becoming the most resilient version of ourselves. It is not a model that everyone admires, but rather a shape that deep down we know we can reach. This concept does not compel us to be perfect. It merely invites us to take each step more mindfully, more proactively, and to take greater responsibility for our lives. When thinking about fully realizing potential, we are not talking about a dazzling destination set by someone else. It is about living truthfully to our deepest nature, where each choice is weighed between what we want and what we know we must do. Fulfillment does not arise from chasing after glittering standards, but from the quiet feeling within when we know we are living true to ourselves. There is a silent flow that leads us to our own purpose. It is not something hung up as a slogan, but rather the direction we recognize in moments of introspection. When we understand what we are aiming for, decisions become clearer, distractions lessen, and we no longer need to compare ourselves to anyone else. This purpose does not promise ease, but it provides us with a foundation to stand firm against the inevitable disturbances. What is noteworthy is that much of what we seek is already within us: perseverance, mindfulness, resilience, the ability to rise after setbacks. All lie dormant, waiting to be awakened. The absence is not of capability, but of trust in that capability. When we accept that our inner strength is not something to be borrowed, we become less chaotic in the face of temporary limitations. However, potential does not shine forth simply because we possess it. It only unfolds when we are willing to work for ourselves, to observe ourselves each day, and to cultivate a calm attitude amidst turmoil. Consistent effort sharpens the mind. Clear awareness fosters the maturity of behavior. Personal development is not a sprint, but a slow, intentional process, patient enough to change bit by bit. And then, at some point, when we look back, we realize that the journey toward wholeness is not about seeking something more, but about awakening what has long been within us. When the inner self is illuminated, the outer self naturally changes. Fulfillment does not come from luck, but from our willingness to engage in the process of refining ourselves each day. From here, thoughts begin to shift towards a more stable level of awareness, where individuals no longer react hastily to fluctuations. Believing that opportunities will arise is not naivety, but rather the result of a journey to understand one's own limits. When the mind is no longer pulled by the fear of missing out, the spirit becomes steadier and clearer. Opportunities that appear at the right moment are not due to forced will, but because of internal readiness. This trust is not about leaving fate to chance, but a reminder that valuable things only blossom when we are still enough to receive them. When life energy is directed properly, success seems to come naturally. It does not stem from displays or stressful calculations, but from the consistency between what we think, what we do, and what we truly value. People often confuse success with external results, but energy is the root. A chaotic mind struggles to create lasting outcomes, while a disciplined and clear spirit has a natural allure. When inner strength is stable, what is compatible will naturally lean towards us without the need to fight for it. The liberation from a state of constant tension opens up a new space, where effort does not turn into self-destructive pressure. Continuous struggle often leads to exhaustion, while calmness keeps us resilient. There is no need to prove anything, no need to chase after anyone. Just do enough and do it right. With a lighter mind, the long road becomes more feasible. When we no longer push ourselves beyond necessary limits, we see our true goals more clearly and let go of desires that do not bring value. When focusing on personal growth and alignment with one's true nature, the distortions of external expectations gradually diminish. The path becomes clearer when we choose to live according to what we believe is right, rather than being pulled by noise. Discipline helps to create a foundation, while awareness helps to maintain direction. Maturity occurs gradually, through small decisions repeated long enough to create change. There is no need to seek perfection. Just continue to adjust to get closer to a kinder and stronger version of oneself. Realization begins when individuals live authentically and believe in their internal capabilities. It is not magic, but the natural result of the unity between thought and action. When one no longer wears a mask, energy becomes pure and clear, and what is suitable will be drawn in. Here, belief is not self-delusion, but the awareness that personal value inherently carries weight. When living true to that, we become a support for ourselves, and everything built is rooted in durability. There is no guarantee that what we desire will arrive exactly when we wait for it. We still have to breathe, still have to continue living, and still have to accept that there are rhythms beyond anyone's control. Upon closer inspection, that delay is not a rejection, but merely a reminder that something is happening beyond our calculations. Yielding to it is not giving up, but a form of calmness in the face of what cannot be forced. From that foundation, one returns to oneself, not to strive for perfection, but to be honest about the distance between the present and a better version of oneself. This path is quiet, with little noise and little boasting. It is like sitting with oneself at the end of the day and observing which actions stem from awareness and which are driven by fear. Then, from there, adjusting little by little, patiently. Becoming a better version does not require declaration, just the continuation. Haste often leads us to chase after things we think we lack. But not every need is truly worth pursuing. Often, that pursuit only drains our spirit, pulling us away from the essentials. Wasting time on trivial desires only to lose the energy for more important matters is a form of self-harm that is hard to recognize. True satisfaction does not lie in the countless things we accumulate, but in knowing what to keep and what to let fall. When we stop rushing towards meaningless needs, we create space to clearly see our direction. Growth is not an explosive moment, but a series of quiet adjustments in character. Some days, simply maintaining integrity in a small situation is a step forward. Some days, just not compromising with our own ease is a form of victory. The goal is not external praise, but the feeling of standing firm on our own feet without relying on anyone else's recognition. However, no matter how hard we try, there remains a large part of life that is uncontrollable. Clinging tightly to everything only makes our hands more tired. Making room for the fluctuations that occur naturally lightens the mind, and the energy for what truly belongs to us becomes clearer. Letting go here is not indifference, but a refusal to expend energy on battles we know we cannot win. When we stop forcing the world to bend to our will, a valuable silence emerges. In that silence, we can allow ourselves to simply exist, not straining to prove anything, not chasing the image others expect. Just being ourselves, with real limitations and real capabilities. From this state, decisions become clearer, no longer driven by the fear of missing out or the desire to hide flaws. Acceptance is not a one-time action. It is a habit cultivated every day. Some days we succeed, some days we do not. But each time we return to that state of calmness, we see clearly that acceptance does not diminish us. It simply helps us place ourselves in the right position, a part of a larger flow, not separate, not the supreme controller, but also not a powerless victim swept away. At that point, living becomes simpler. Not less challenging, but less complicated. No one knows in advance what awaits around the corner, but with deep enough acceptance, we are no longer afraid to face it, because we know we can stand still amidst all fluctuations as long as we maintain awareness and responsibility for our own lives. And thus, no matter how the world turns, we still have a place to breathe, to remain calm enough to take another step forward. The late afternoon sunlight quietly crawls across the floor, leaving behind fragile patches of light as if challenging the mind to maintain its calmness. In that slow rhythm of movement, the feeling of harmonizing with a greater energy becomes clear. It is not a forced effort, just a small adjustment within, letting go of haste, maintaining a steady breath, so that the mood is not swept away by unpredictable fluctuations. When emotions become tidy, energy no longer runs wild, and one naturally comes closer to a state of resonance with the universe. It feels like stepping into a room that is already quiet. Just a slightly lighter footfall is enough for everything to harmonize. The inner space within each person also needs to be tidied up in this way. Every time we cling to things that have lost their purpose, we inadvertently occupy the space of what is trying to come in. Creating space is not an act of denying the past, but a decision to keep the present clean. A closet that opens to only a few necessary items is always easier to breathe in than a place filled with things no longer used. When the mind is processed in this way, all heavy feelings will naturally leave, making room for what is suitable to appear at the right time. From that foundation, confidence becomes a light that does not need to be displayed. It is not loud, does not try to attract anyone, simply radiates through a straight posture, through a steady voice, through decisions not influenced by fear. This confidence does not rely on achievements or compliments, but on the ability to manage one's thoughts and emotions. When the mind is stable, the temperament naturally stabilizes. At that moment, our presence becomes a silent commitment that we are enough to face any circumstance. When a person focuses on becoming a more resilient version of themselves each day, opportunities do not need to be chased. They come because the internal change has created a natural attraction. The way we behave, the way we maintain discipline, the way we face challenges, all create a form of signal sent out to the world. The right opportunities will recognize that signal, like an open door for those who know where they are headed. There is no need for showiness nor demands. Inner growth is the strongest invitation. However, this process rarely follows a straight path. There are days when everything moves slower than imagined, and there are prolonged, silent phases that make us doubt our direction. But trust in the process helps us stand firm in those gaps. Trust is not about relinquishing control, but accepting that deep changes often occur quietly and take time. When we are not swept away by anxiety, we maintain the clarity to continue taking small steps, enough for the process to unfold without being interrupted by unease. And when trust has been strengthened, allowing life to unfold becomes lighter. There is no longer a feeling of needing to control everything. No more struggle between expectations and reality. We just need to be ready to observe, adapt, and continue to maintain inner autonomy. Life has its own way of guiding, sometimes with a faint sign, sometimes with a sudden major change. But when the mind is calm enough to receive, everything that happens can be handled with tranquility. And it is in that naturally unfolding space that the journey of creating what is suitable for oneself becomes more complete, more sustainable, not due to luck, but because of how we have prepared ourselves for each moment before. True strength emerges the moment we stop seeking external validation and turn our gaze inward, not to indulge the ego, but to clearly see the unfinished parts, the habits that need to be refined, and the values that have quietly existed for a long time, but have yet to be fully utilized. Becoming a better version of oneself is not a race, but a calm promise that each day holds something that needs to be done right, no matter how small it may be, unnoticed by anyone but oneself. Maturity begins when we no longer demand that life be easy. Belief becomes solid when it is not based on outcomes, but on intentional effort. Stability does not arise from feelings of excitement, but from the ability to remain steady in the face of short-term fluctuations, reminding oneself that the most important things are still within control. Every step forward, no matter how slow, reconstructs the inner structure, helping us discern what is valuable and what is merely noise. When we slowly reflect inward, we realize that what we need most has never truly been absent. The will to continue, the ability to adjust our course, the awareness of easy choices, all of it is there, waiting to be named. The remaining task is simply to clear away distractions to rediscover the resources that have always existed. It is not about seeking some strange power, but about restoring the connection with the most steadfast part of ourselves. And from that moment, the path becomes clearer, not because circumstances have changed, but because we have tapped into a foundation of inner strength strong enough to withstand challenges. Every subsequent action is merely about maintaining authenticity with that strong part, so that each step is rooted in awareness, not in scarcity. Proactivity does not arise on its own. It is forged by refusing to stand outside one's own life. By abandoning the habit of passive observation, we step out of the audience's position to return to the role of someone living each moment. No longer sitting back and watching events unfold without involvement, we force ourselves to look directly at the choices before us, no matter how small. This courage does not make noise. It quietly shifts the mindset from "let it be" to "I will do it." And it is this subtle shift that paves the way for lasting autonomy. From that point, reclaiming our personal narrative is no longer an ambiguous slogan. We learn to view our lives as a flowing narrative that continues to be written, rather than a manuscript handed over to someone else for editing. The choices become clearer. Either let circumstances drag us along, or slowly rebuild the way we want to move forward. There is no need for drama or grand declarations. We simply need to dare to acknowledge that we have the right to steer our own course. When this awareness takes root, we stop comparing, stop relinquishing control, and begin to reconstruct our trajectory through simple yet steadfast actions. The transition from waiting to taking responsibility is always quiet and challenging. Waiting for an ideal moment leaves us stagnant. Then we convince ourselves that everything cannot begin yet. But responsibility does not demand perfect conditions. It only requires the acceptance that this is our part to play. When we stop making excuses and start taking action, we realize that many barriers exist primarily in our minds. This does not turn us into rigid individuals, but into people who no longer rely on vague hopes to justify procrastination. Every proactive step, no matter how small, builds a sense of inner power, the power to steer. All of this has a true foundation when we know how to maintain control over our minds. Not control through force, but through clear observation of the constantly racing thoughts. When we realize we can choose our perspective, we also recognize we can choose our approach to life. Worry is only worry if we allow it to dominate. Distraction only lingers when we let our will drift. Cultivating this control is not to escape emotions, but to ensure that each emotion has its rightful place, not taking the wheel of our lives. In every situation, the difference between reaction and response most clearly reflects the level of autonomy. Reaction is instinctive, occurring when we let external factors pull the strings. Response arises when we have enough pause to choose what aligns with our values. That pause is the result of training, not luck. When response replaces reaction, we are no longer led by impulsive words, uncomfortable looks, or unexpected events. We still feel everything, but we do not let them turn us into versions of ourselves we do not want to be. And when all of this is connected, proactivity becomes the silent axis that shifts the entirety of our inner lives. We no longer feel swept away by chaos, nor do we wait for anyone or anything to clear the way. Each choice is placed back in its rightful position, in our hands, under our clear observation, and guided by the calmness we have cultivated day by day. This is not a comfortable path, but it is the path that keeps us steady, even when the world around us shifts. The most evident truth about responsibility is that every time we avoid mistakes, we are merely postponing a necessary lesson. Blaming others may feel relieving in the moment, but the price paid is the dulling of our inner strength. The temporary feeling of being protected makes us forget that honesty with ourselves is the foundation for standing firm. When we dare to take our share of every outcome, our minds become clearer, no longer dragged down by self-justifying stories. Obstacles are not the only hindrances. They also serve as reminders that we always have the right to choose how to respond. Sometimes everything happens unexpectedly, not according to plan, and no one can bear the burden for us. Yet the next turn always lies in our hands. Choices are not always pleasant, sometimes contrary to our instinct for safety. However, it is those awkward moments that reveal the true boundary between the passive and those who know how to steer their own trajectory. When we choose to act instead of complain, even small steps become evidence of growth. Life gradually takes shape from such a series of decisions. Each choice, whether big or small, quietly shapes the person we will become. No transformation occurs in a single day, but consistency turns scattered elements into clear outlines. Looking back, we realize there is no miraculous moment that changes everything, only repeated decisions based on the standards we set for ourselves. This is both frightening and liberating. Frightening because we cannot rely on chance, but relieving because the power to shape our lives has never left our hands. Changing oneself is always more practical than trying to change circumstances. External situations often do not respond as we wish, while the mind can be trained every day. When we adjust our perspective, pressure becomes clearer and easier to manage. When we correct our habits, chaos turns into order. It is not always convenient, but each time we self-correct, we reduce our dependence on the outside world. From there, a proactive mindset grows stronger, capable of withstanding fluctuations without losing direction. The feeling of holding the pen to write the next chapter of our lives is not an illusion of optimism. It comes from the understanding that personal responsibility is the quietest form of power. No one writes for us, nor erases for us. There are bright pages and pages filled with smudges, but the one holding the pen is still us. When we dare to face all consequences, the writing becomes steady, not trembling before judgment or failure. And each new story that emerges is not to beautify the past, but to prove that the journey of self-mastery does not stop at any conclusion. It only continues when we have the courage to choose, take responsibility, and move forward.